Donald Trump quietly aligning US foreign policies with Russian interests? This latest moves on Ukraine and NATO have experts raising eyebrows and Putin smiling. But is strategy or something more? Let's break it down. Imagine a world where America steps back, Russia steps forward, and the Ukraine is left in limbo. That's not just speculation, it's unfolding right now. Trump's rhetoric and policy shifts mirror key Kremlin objectives. One of Trump's most controversial positions has been his refusal to hold Russia fully accountable for the war in Ukraine. Instead of condemning Putin for the unprovoked invasion in 2022, Trump has repeatedly suggested that Ukraine should never have initiated the conflict. That echoes a Kremlin backed narrative and paints Russia as a reluctant participant rather than aggressor. Additionally, Trump has gone as far as labeling Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky a dictator, which is a direct inversion of reality. Putin is an authoritarian leader, with Ukraine continues to hold democratic elections even in wartime. These talks favoring Russia. Trump's proposed solution to end the war sounds suspiciously like Putin's wish list. His peace proposal includes allowing Russia to keep occupied territories, blocking Ukraine from NATO membership, and lifting sanctions on Moscow. In other words, their so called peace plans would reward Putin's aggressive rather than deterrent. Even more concerning, Ukraine has left out a key negotiations where Russia officials were present suggesting a diplomatic strategies and priorities. Russia's interests over Ukraine's sovereignty. Undermining Western unity, the NATO alliance has been crucial in helping Ukraine fight off Russian advance, but Trump's consistent skepticism of NATO plays directly in Putin's hands. By questioning the US commitment to the alliance, he's weakened Western unity and gives Moscow more NATO support for Ukraine may not be sustainable. Trump has floated the idea of withdrawing the US from NATO altogether, something that would be an absolute gift to the Kremlin. The more divided the West is, the stronger Russia becomes. This isn't a sudden shift, it follows a familiar pattern that dates back to Trump's first term in office. Putin administration past actions. Trump has a long history of praising Vladimir Putin, and once called Putin a genius for his handling of Ukraine, and is constantly refusing to criticize Russia's authoritarian rule. His reluctance to acknowledge Russian election interference in 2016, even when US intelligence agencies confirmed it, raises alarms about his willingness to accept Moscow's versions of the event. Then there's Trump's first impeachment, which was directly related to his efforts to withhold military aid to Ukraine in order to pressure Zelensky into launching an investigation into Joe Biden. That too was seen as a move that benefited Russia more than it did the US. Some political analysts argue that Trump sees Russia as a potential counterweight to China. His foreign policy has always focused on economic advantage, and there's speculation that he views cooperation with Russia as a way to shift from US attention to economic competition with Beijing. However, many experts warn that this approach legitimizes Russian territorial conquest and weaken American standing in Europe. Trump even showed interest in Ukraine's natural resources, pushing to gain access to Ukraine's valuable mineral deposits, something Zelensky firmly rejected. Not everyone is on board with Trump's stance, and the backlash has been significant. While some members of the Republican Party support Trump's approach to Ukraine and Russia, others strongly opposed. Figures like Marco Rubio have echoed Trump's arguments that the US should focus on domestic issues rather than Ukraine. However, others such as Senator Lisa Malvolsky and Susan Collins have pushed back, arguing that abandoning Ukraine would only involve Putin and weaken US credibility on the global stage. The divide within the Republican Party is clear. Some believe in the traditional U.S. foreign policy commitments, while others are embracing Trump's isolation and Russia's friendly stance. The European concerns. Trump's shift in foreign policy prioritizes has raised alarms across Europe. Leaders in France, Germany, and UK have been increasingly concerned that a second Trump presidency could lead to a weakening of NATO, leaving Europe nations more vulnerable to Russian. Adding to these concerns, Trump has expressed support for Germany's far right AfD party, a political movement that has been linked to the pro Russian sentiments. His threats of imposing new trade wars on Europe nations only further alienation traditional U.S. allies. Does all this mean Trump is outright copying Putin? Not necessarily. While there are undeniable similarities between Trump's rhetoric and Kremlin's backed narratives, there are also fundamental differences. Trump is no longer strategic like part Putin. He focuses on the quick political wins rather than building a multi-decade vision of global power. Putin, on the other hand, is playing a long game, aiming at restoring Russia imperial power and challenging the Western led world order. Another key difference is that Trump, unlike Putin, operates within a democratic system, while he has certainly tested limits on American democracy. Attempting to overturn elections results encouraging his supporters to question institutions and downplaying democratic movement. He still faces legal and political pushback. Putin, on the other hand, has near total control over Russian politics, the judicial and media. That means even if Trump wanted to operate exactly like Putin, he would face more institutional roadblocks in the US than Putin does in Russia. The real question isn't whether Trump is mimicking Putin, it's whether his policies are unintentionally or deliberately advancing Russians' interests. If Trump's foreign policy leads to weaker NATO, a fractured Western alliance, and more powerful Russia, the result may be the same regardless of his intent, whether design or by conceding that his moves are aligning with Moscow goal. And that's where things get dangerous. Putin's long term ambition is to reset Russia's dominance and expand its sphere of influence. A US president who downplays Russia's aggressiveness, questions NATO, and disrupts international alliance only makes that goal easier to achieve. As the world watches, the stakes couldn't be higher. What do you think? Is this a strategic move or a dangerous shift? Leave a comment below and let's talk about it.